Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Battle of Blockchains, and we should hear this Game of Thrones music in our ears now. Yeah, thank you. Blockchain Center Vilnius is very happy to have you all here and present you Talk and Trade. This is our trademark events that we are doing every Wednesday, 6:30 local time, live stream on our Facebook page. So every next Wednesday, check our Facebook and check our discussions in Blockchain Center Vilnius. Many different topics, many different people comes there. We give them a stage to talk and to tell what they're doing with blockchain, what they're doing with everything there. So, and today we have a 21st or 22nd event, right, of Talk and Trade. And this time we're very happy and we want to thank Pillar to have this opportunity to present different platforms, blockchain platforms, and let's check what they are. How do they interact with each other? Are we going to have a battle or a very nice conversation? And we'll know that, and it's upon Dima and Anastasia, who are going to be our leaders of this discussion. They will lead us to this very nice discussion. So, Anastasia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, as Žygimantas said, we're extremely happy that we have really amazing panel today. And let me just brief you what Talk and Trade is. Basically, the goal of the Blockchain Center and Talk and Trade as an event just to educate the community and just to build bridges between industry professionals, community members, people who are absolutely new to the crypto and the blockchain. So some of the questions and discussions can be technical, but also we do encourage to explain projects in a basic manner. And to begin with, let me present you our honorable participants. So first of all, it's Vinay Gupta. He is a CEO of Ethereum project, and he was on the original team. No. Oh, no.
So I run a company called Ethereum.
Yes.
And I was the project manager for the Ethereum release, joined the team 2014.
Yes. I would mention Ethereum in my second sentence, but yeah, thank you very much. So we have Paul Pierce from Raddix decentralized DLT project, and we are really eager to hear about everything about it.
Next participant is Paul Rear from NEM, Network, Community, and Blockchain, right? And you are taking part in there? Head of Business Development. So, nice to have you here.
And also we have Arvidas. Gary, that's very sweet of you. Also we have Arvidas Dabulskis, who is representing Hashgraph. And I think we do want to know a lot about this new concept and new technology. So, to begin with, we suggest all our participants just to present really shortly the concept of the project they're working on, and in a manner that will be understandable for everyone, both tech and non-tech people. So, who is the first? Oh, go ahead.
And to make it like standard, we will give not more than 2 minutes for each participant. So your time is now.
Hi guys, so Raddix is a very high level, a speedy alternative to blockchains and DAGs. It is a trustless, permissionless, decentralized ledger technology. What we did is we went, like all of these consensus algorithms we're using, proof of work, proof of stake, and all of these data architectures we're using, blockchain DAGs, they don't work very well at global scale. So let's think about it from the point of view of a database, to start from that. If we have every single person, every single device using a database simultaneously in the world, which is what you have to do because the blockchain, the DLTs are stateful, they remember what's happened so that you can't do double spend, you can't be dishonest, you're going to have the largest database ever created. And what people are currently doing is they're saying, let's start with a single instance and then let's cut it up as we go, right? So let's shard it, and then we have 2 shards, and then we have 4 shards. But that adds overhead. You've got to constantly readjust the shards and tell everyone, right? And it also means that the data architecture itself is not deterministic. I don't know where the data is living because it changes as we go. So we said, look, what we're going to do is we're going to cut it into 18.4 quintillion shards, 2 to the power 64. And we're going to start with a massively sharded architecture that doesn't change. So you will always be at the same shard address from now until there is 6 billion people and 24 billion devices. And this meant that the data architecture is incredibly efficient and has no overhead for indexing and being able to write to it. And then we created a consensus mechanism that is based on the passage of logical time, and logical time only. There is no proof of work, there's no proof of stake. And using that, we're able to have Byzantine fault detection. We're able to tell if someone is lying about historical events rather than having everyone having to agree on what historical events are continuously. And this means that the consensus mechanism, being passive, is incredibly efficient. So we can do massive scale linearly. And because it's sharded, nodes can either do a small subsection of the shard space or a massive one. So it's completely decentralized. Low IoT and massive servers.
And your time is up. Anyone understood everything, right?
Of course, that was great. Many more.
Actually, from your speech, I had some questions, but it only encourages me to study more about Raddix. So it's great.
Three main things about, first of all, recently we announced that our public network, which is called Hedera, and 3 main things about Hedera Hashgraph is Hedera Hashgraph is really fast. It is hundreds of thousands transactions per second with seconds of latency for consensus. Hedera Hashgraph is really secure. It has enterprise grade security level. In other words, it is ABFT, asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant. It is gold standard for distributed ledger technologies. And Hedera Hashgraph is fair. Anyone can place the node on the network. Anyone with a laptop can set it and have a node. It is open for everyone to participate in the network. It doesn't have master nodes. It doesn't have master shards. Everyone in the network is equal. Yeah.
And that's it?
Yep.
What do you mean, that's it? It wasn't enough?
It's enough. It's enough. Okay. Nem? And go.
Okay, so NEM is one of the oldest and most proven platforms out there. It's actually, well, it was launched, the main was launched in early 2015, written from scratch, so actually new development. And the main focus is that it's actually the most advanced API-driven platform. So we have great on-chain features. Everything has been proven many, many times in the actually industry applications. We have an enterprise team that actually develops the platform, and our core functionality that lives on the blockchain enables, I would say, 90 to 95% of the use cases that people try to solve by creating smart contracts that are not scalable. So our main use case is, of course, that we are integratable into any existing software stack, maybe legacy systems, maybe new systems, whatever it is. So that's actually quite useful for enterprise applications.
It's even faster. Thank you.
Corporate product.
Yes. So, EOS.
I will try to be quick here. 2 minutes. Okay. So EOS is one of the newest platforms, distributed platforms. It's probably the most powerful infrastructure for distributed applications. Yes, it's not proved yet. People are developing those applications. There are new projects just starting, but basically is community-run infrastructure. There were some guys, some developers who started, who built the software. Then the software was released to the public, and community overtook the mainnet launch, and now it's just really probably the biggest social experiment of our time, because it's governed by delegated consensus. It means there is democracy, there are Ricardian contracts, there are some open governance, and there are a lot of intrigues, disputes, and a lot of stuff. Yet it's really the very powerful infrastructure we are running it. Yeah, there are 20 more seconds, but I will leave it like that.
Well, in those 10 seconds of the index, we will see if it's one of the most expensive social experiments as well. And let me pass the mic.
Okay, so 2 minutes for the Ethereum network, and you go. It was really most realistic introduction to the network I've heard. It's slow, but it works, so yes.
Mostly works. Yeah. We only lost $330 million of other people's money from screw-ups.
Yeah, but you know.
But people are still buying Ethereum, so
Well, because it's actually there, right? It has a simple property, which is it's kind of a known property, right? What you see is what you get. But the problem that all the problem that all blockchain projects have is once you're successful, it becomes super hard to innovate without breaking the existing transaction rates, right? So, my fear is our blockchain ecosystem is that we're never going to get mass adoption of blockchain as a whole because we never figure out how to mutate blockchains into the future. So we just wind up with one technology replacing another technology replacing another technology, and it just winds up as this continuous sea of fork, like JavaScript front end libraries.
So you're saying that we need to develop something in stealth mode, prepare it for the whole adoption period, and only after that introduce it to the community and say, look, we have a working product already.
Well, nothing is going to be perfect
one question about that. So do you think that there will be one blockchain to rule them all? That actually, because iterations happen in any software project, right? But wouldn't a realistic alternative be that, well, you have iterations in software stacks, you have a standard that ensures compatibility between different networks, and so you can iterate and actually upgrade new networks, and they're still compatible with existing networks?
Yeah, well, the one and only blockchain. I'm sure there will not be just a single blockchain, because Bitcoin guys, they are talking that, oh, that's the Bitcoin that will stay for a lifetime. But I think most of the biggest infrastructures like Ethereum, NEM, they will stay here, because for every solution you need different approach, and Ethereum probably doesn't need that much transaction per second like Hashgraph is proposing. Like if you can live with that, if in those cases where you need this censorship resistance and other systems, distributed applications, Ethereum is perfect. For those financial systems, it's NEM that is best. For just regular distributed applications, EOS is the best platform. So I think all of them, they will stay here.
So we settled on a single protocol for the exchange of information, which was TCP/IP. Right? There were competing protocols, and the advantage that came to the world as a result of a single way in which we transacted information was massive innovation. As a result of that, because that single platform for building on. I think that ultimately what you have with a DLT is a stateful system that has the ability to spot dishonest actors, either a double spend or something like that. I think that a universal protocol, a universal standard for doing that, just as an abstract concept, is a very feasible result, because then what you have is everyone understands the standard for which they can build the innovations that they want to do. Instead, you don't have these little ecosystems that you have to learn everything about, and then you move to the next one when you're, oh, I'm an EOS developer, oh, I'm a Hashgraph developer, oh, I'm a Raddix developer. I think that there will be a center of gravity that will be the easiest to use platform that can provably scale to the most number of people simultaneously.
So,
this is being solved at the moment. We have only one mic.
okay. Is this one actually okay? So I mean, I'm quite confident there will be ISO standards and so on, but it will be standards, not platforms that are being standardized, most likely. So the platforms can implement standards, but it's not like, well, you're the platform that implemented standards, so that's why you're the leading platform. I think that's actually not well, won't be the case, because it's not feasible, even though it's feasible to introduce standards. And secondly, I think that it always depends on what are you trying to solve with the infrastructure. Just because you can solve lots of things doesn't mean you're the best infrastructure for everything. And I think for that there are multiple approaches. And I personally like the approach of a network of networks a lot, because you can have domain-specific attributes that you're trying to introduce into a certain network that you don't need for other networks, but they can still be compatible. I don't want to cut him off.
Couple seconds. You mentioned TCP/IP, but we are not on that layer. We are working on top of this. On TCP/IP, there are other protocols that are working. It's email, SMTP. That's FTP for file transfer. So you can look at the blockchains in the same layer. So we will have IPFS. We will have probably standardized Ethereum type things here, but that's different layers. We are not inventing internet once more.
So the question is not so much about the networks. The question is about the assets, right? If you have a bunch of assets whose legal representation is on an Ethereum contract, you just can't get out those assets from another protocol. So the network which has the most assets on it will have the most liquidity, so it will be the most efficient place to trade, which potentially creates a winner keeps winning situation. The problem in that situation is you then can't innovate the damn software platform, so you wind up with the entire world running on crappy old technology. And this is my biggest worry with blockchain, is that because of the winner keeps winner liquidity pooling type problems, you're going to wind up with ancient crappy technology, which turns out to be the thing that everybody's using, Bitcoin.
Which I mean, and I think that's super important in terms of what the governance structure behind that looks like, because the governance structure and the stakeholders and the ability to continue to innovate once a protocol is implemented, it really comes down to how the community addresses and pushes that protocol forwards from that point forward. So, like if you don't have good governance structure and you don't have good way of identifying all your stakeholders, you end up with this problem of technology stagnation.
That's why I will ask you a couple of questions about governance. We have different projects with different governance models, and it would be really nice to know what kind of governance models are implemented. For example, I've heard EOS is a decentralized, centralized organization. It's just rumors. I mean, like I read it somewhere. Maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, of course, there are rumors. There are rumors about almost all the projects. It's not centralized. It's a community-run platform. So, yeah, that doesn't sound good, but no, it's democracy. With all the democracies in the world, there are some issues. And so there are with EOS democracy as well. So yeah, that's like.
What about 10 wallets that own 50%?
No, that's just manipulation. That's a manipulation of statistics. It's not right. Some of those wallets are just these exchanges. So who knows what is there in.
I'd like to know who is paying for block producers if it's so decentralized.
Who is paying for block producers? It's this inflation-based incentive mechanism that is paying. So it's just a known inflation, like in Ethereum. Ethereum also has inflation, and there's nothing bad with that. I think just as in the world, we have governments, we have corporations. Every single is ruled by their own way in their own rules. And this platform is such as it is, so you don't like it, don't use it.
It's a fantastic approach, but EOS claims there are no network fees, but actually they're hidden in the inflation that you just mentioned.
No, it's not a fees. It's not a hidden fees. It's inflation. So if you are a speculator, it might hurt you because it might lower the value of your speculated in investment, if we can call crypto investments. But it's inflation is usual to economic models. It is everywhere. Inflation drives, keeps economy going on. So it's not a hidden fees.
So EOS is democracy based, right? And
Yes.
no fees.
At the moment with no fees, but it's democracy based. So if democracy decides, there will be fees.
Okay. NEM?
So NEM is actually is decentralized in the sense that there is no single entity running anything. But with any network that was introduced by some community-driven developers, there's some authority, of course, and the guys that develop the most are the guys that people trust the most. So if they suggest an upgrade, well, most people will follow. So even though you can run whatever you want to run, and whichever version you want to run, most people will follow the lead of the people that have been in the community for a long time. But overall, there are definitely multiple stakeholders in the ecosystem that work on different things that allow us to be decentralized and to claim that we're decentralized. And since, do you want to know about fees as well? Because you're, okay. So, and since a decentralized network actually needs incentivization, and we decided originally, well, I didn't personally, but the developers decided that there shouldn't be inflation. Can be argumented that, well, it doesn't actually matter if you have inflation or not. It just shifts some of the attributes. But there's no inflation, but we have normal fees. So you actually pay a low amount of transaction fees. So right now, on average, you pay 1 cent per transaction. Now, if the price spikes, that's of course a problem because the fees will increase as well. So, and that's why I mentioned that there is some trust. There are some fee forks that are being suggested. So if there's a moving average that is above a certain level, usually the developers will suggest a fee fork. But still, it's up to anybody that runs a node to accept that or not. So there's no centralized entity to control that.
So just to get it right, if I understood it right, at this moment you have a transaction fee which is stable, which is expressed.
It's not stable. It is, so it's stable in XAM, which is the native asset of the NEM platform. But of course, it fluctuates in dollar value or fiat value because of the price fluctuation.
In your native currency, it's always the same.
So there is a formula, and that is known in advance. So it's actually quite easy to calculate it for any type of transactions.
Yeah, so I think governance is very important for any network. And it is kind of like a politics, and I think it's no right way, it's different ways, and people choose which way is more like suitable for them. So Hashgraph have 39 blue chip companies which is governing the Hedera Hashgraph network. And those companies are now, because we are just recently announced the network, they are now kind of negotiating the conditions, and we already have 15 of them, and the rest of them will come this year, and probably in the next part of the year we're gonna announce who those companies are. So those companies are term based, so it's gonna be like every 3 years they're gonna change. So it's gonna like always give fresh people in the voting for the network.
So it's like a network of companies.
Yes.
And these companies will change, but for 3 years it's like a government, right?
Yeah.
It's a government, and they decide like forever.
Yeah, it's gonna be like changing like more often. Like it's like not at the same time all the companies gonna be changing. So it's gonna be like after 1 year gonna like change third, and then after another year gonna change third. So it's gonna provide like new people in the council.
What about fees?
So at least at the moment, this estimated fees gonna be probably somewhere around 6 million of the cent per transaction. So it's like 0 point and like a bunch of zeros, and
You probably have a really big hedge fund somewhere to finance all the network, because from that fees it will be like
yeah, because we have Hedera Hashgraph have very low overhead for transactions. It's like it's not proof of work. It's only confirming the transactions. It's have a really low requirements for energy and for transaction confirmation. So that's how Hedera Hashgraph can provide that low fees for transactions.
and millions of transactions will like win from quantity but not the price, right?
Probably.
But it is a more or less permission ledger.
Yeah.
So
Of course.
It's you have what you have in mind permission ledger.
There are 39 final arbiters of consensus on the network.
So I would say like it's two different things: the governance and the nodes who confirming the transactions. It's two separate things. So governance is 39 members, as for Ethereum, EOS have how many? 21, I think. Active. Yeah. Yeah. So 39 members who govern the marketing and fees and the development. Those 39, and then are nodes. And nodes gonna be anyone can launch their own node. And those nodes, everyone is equal in the network and confirming the transactions, and they're gonna get the fees.
Right, but the nodes have to stake, and Hedera owns 95% of the staking capability. So it is centralized because no one else can stake an amount that would mean anything for consensus.
Yeah, to launch the network, it's for security reasons. Those tokens gonna be distributed by through a long time. So if you want to launch a network, you can't like because now the token gonna be like in beginning gonna be quite not inexpensive, and someone can buy a bunch of them and hack the network.
Your security model sucks, not because you need to do it like that.
It's where is the proof that it sucks? We even don't have a public network yet, and we don't have a like the source code to show to people.
But why should anybody run a node? So is there incentive?
Yeah, it's incentive. You're gonna get the fees for transactions. That's.
Like, how many fees do I have to? Like, how many transactions should be there just for me to get $1?
Yeah, but you see, it's a much better problem to have when it's like you need a lot of transactions to get the fees than when you have a problem that you can't handle the transactions.
Yeah, but look, to run a node, I need a server. So
Yes.
the minimum server in DigitalOcean is $10.
VPS or something.
5. Okay, 5.
You can always invite a friend and have a discount.
Like you will not be able to run let's say EOS block producer on such a, because it costs a couple of thousands a month.
Yeah, so for sure we expecting to have a lot of transactions. That's like, yeah, if we will not have transactions, then yes, for sure, no one gonna want to have a node because they not make money. But it's
I think we need to listen to Raddix.
Thank you. So fees and governance are sort of an interesting topic. That are sort of two separate things to some extent. Governance obviously comes into fees, but the way that we sort of see fees is that you set the fee. In Raddix, you don't have a constraint on how many transactions you can put through the network. So one of the big problems in terms of the increase in cost of fees on something like a blockchain is that you have congestion, so people start bidding against each other to get into a block. So what instead we look at the fees as is like, what level of redundancy do you want in the network? Because the more redundancy you have, the less any given person is earning from processing transactions. So you can use the fee model as a way of basically dialing up or dialing down redundancy. We're starting with 0.1 cent, right? But then we can dial that up and dial that down, and that does flow into our governance model. So the governance model, we've identified 4 definite stakeholders and a 5th potential. The way that we see a cryptographic platform is like founding of a digital state, and the digital state has stakeholders with differing requirements and desires. So one of your digital stakeholders, it's a really important one, are the people who are actually running the network, the nodes, right? The nodes. The nodes that are actually providing the actual infrastructure and keeping it running. So those people need to have a voice. In Raddix, the more work that you produce, that is actually quantifiable per node on the network, so that you get a weighted vote on that. We haven't decided how many representatives or anything like that, but that's the first one. The second one are the people who are balance holders, in terms of if you have more balance, then you get more say in the network. The third are the projects that are actually building on top of it. If you're a successful project and you're bringing customers into the network and you're being successful as a result of building on Raddix, then you should actually get a say in how the Raddix system is being developed as well, because you are part of the success of the infrastructure. And then the fifth one is one that may or may not fall out of identity. If identity is solved by people like Sovereign, like Uport and things like that, you can also have a vote by human, or at least you can have a vote by passport. You can say this is a unique passport, this gets a vote. So that's the sort of the most out there one, but we think that it's important to try and identify as many different stakeholders in the system to make sure that you're getting all voices. Because what happened with things like Bitcoin is that governance was an emergent property that became the capture of the miners, and that ended up causing stagnation. So how do you avoid that, given the fact, as Vinny really nicely put, you have some taillights to follow now?
So one question, average transaction price. What's the estimate?
At the moment, it's 0.1 cent. Set at 0.1 cent.
0.1 cent.
0.1 cent. Yeah. 0.1 cent. But that varies if you're doing smart contracts, obviously. Like but like just a standard transaction. Yes, we can. Yes, yeah. It's there's two layers. There's the API-driven stuff, which looks a lot like what NEM does in terms of here's some calls, like if you want to generate a token, if you want to do a multi-sig, if you want to do certain base level shit, like that should just be APIs. You shouldn't need to write a smart contract for that.
Is it so flexible like
Yeah, so the next level up is what we call the Scripto framework, which is Turing complete. Yeah.
So for the fees, you said you pay for the redundancy, right?
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So if I pay 0.1 cent, how much redundancy do I get for that?
Yeah, so this is a factor of how much it costs to run the network as a node, right? So if you have 20 nodes on a network and it's costing them an average of 0.001 cent per transaction, then you can go to 0.1 cent as an average fee that you earn 1 in 100 times, and then you're earning the cost of running your network, right? If you adjust the fees, then you adjust how many... Right, so that would come down to the governance. So that comes into how the governance is run. Right, but the only thing that you're worrying about on Raddix isn't throughput. You don't have congestion of throughput, so you don't ever end up.
Limitations for every network. It's not that there's a limitless network. Just actually constraints, electronic constraints. So there's no congestion network. I mean, that's just not true. Sorry, but it's just
Okay, I mean, it's in alpha now. The test network is up. Feel free to spam it.
Thank you a lot. Let's listen for the Ethereum. I would like to know if there are any other governors except Vitalik.
It's Vinny here. Another governor.
Yeah. So here we have to separate some things out, right? So if you think of the Linux ecosystem, you've got Stallman, you've got Torvalds, you've got things like the Linux Foundation, you've got copyright law, and the various entities that enforce copyright law. You have big actors in the system like IBM, and all of these things contribute to the governance of Linux as an open source project. So whenever you're looking at these things, you've got to separate out who's doing the software from who's running the network and whatever other questions that might arise. So if we talk about the governance layer, I think there are now maybe 9 or 10 independent implementations of the Ethereum protocol. And there's a pretty diverse kind of, argumentative dogpile of processes for trying to approve modifications to the Ethereum protocol. I think it's been pretty clear that there have been a few things that Vitalik really wanted to happen that didn't happen, and you've certainly seen other players from the early days of Ethereum get told where to go when they want a changes made. So I think it's reasonable to say that there is a fair degree of autonomy of the protocol from, shall we say, the whims of Vitalik. Right? If Vitalik really nailed his colours to the mast and make a big deal of something, maybe it'd get through, maybe it wouldn't. But if it didn't, it certainly wouldn't happen the next time. So I think we're going through a slow process of democratization simply by virtue of the fact that more and more of the power is in the hands of the developers who are maintaining the software, and less of that work is paid for by the Ethereum Foundation. So I think we're slowly democratizing. Then you have the tyranny of the miners. And the tyranny of the miners is a measurable thing. You can figure out how many miners there are. You can figure out how the pools are structured. There's no way around the fact that proof-of-work systems are intensely subject to concentration of power because there are economies of scale in mining. Our biggest problem is that the blockchain systems are simply machines that print oligarchs. No, it's a real problem, right? I mean, the cure for capitalism is not more capitalism, weirdly enough, right? And it's not clear that the oligarch-producing machine goes away when you move to proof-of-stake or any of these other systems, right? We still don't have anything that resembles actual democratization of these systems. And if you did have actual democratization, democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner, right? You need constitutional thinking to be able to create protected enclosures. EOS has certainly made some steps in that direction. It still has most of one leg left. But I think it's it's survived, right? But so the crux of this is, what kinds of power are we delegating to who, right? Does anybody in the system have the ability to reverse an illegal transaction if the threat is, or the founders go to jail, right? Are there levers you can pull? And the most primitive systems are also the toughest in that sense. Like Bitcoin, you would have to work very hard with an international consortium of governments to force a Bitcoin transaction to be reverted. It would take enormous effort. That is not nearly so true for a lot of other systems, including Ethereum, right? If you put a gun to Vitalik's head, you could probably get a transaction reverted simply because he's a single point of leverage. Nobody in the Bitcoin ecosystem matters that much. They'd all cheerfully see people set on fire to protect the network. And I think that kind of, just nasty attitude is part of why Bitcoin is likely to survive. Because the bottom line is, it doesn't matter, the people are so sandpapery rough that, if you threaten individuals inside of the Bitcoin network, the rest of the network is just going to be like, oh, it sucks to be that guy. Honey badger, right? You're never ever wrong, right? So on the transaction fees side of this, Ethereum is outrageously expensive to use. Right? It doesn't seem to stop people using it, but it certainly does mean that when people are doing something like bloody CryptoKitties or Rare or whatever it is, you're always going to wind up with these problems because at the end of the day, in network architecture terms, I think that the main Ethereum network is increasingly going to be used like DNS, right? It's a place that you store the keys, which are then used to generate authorities in other networks. And I think in the long run, we're going to look back at this notion of having a single chain that all transactions go over as being totally insane. Bitcoin might wind up as a central bank reserve currency machine, which really doesn't do a transaction for less than about a couple $100 million. And then you just wind up with, fractal seas of other things that are using Bitcoin as reserves, or, Lightning networks and all the rest of this stuff. I think the era of a single blockchain thing that does everything is largely over. I think instead what you're going to get is a variety of architectures, and it's the interoperability between those architectures that's the real governance question. But yeah, my expectation is that Ethereum is going to continue to be pretty damn expensive to use, and that it's going to come down to Plasma and other similar systems to make it affordable for doing bulk transactions. And I don't expect the governance situation to change rapidly. In particular, there's a lot of skepticism about democracy, and a lot of enthusiasm for the kind of well-proven Linux-style, benevolent dictator for life kind of an approach, which is strengths and weaknesses. But it's a good way of getting software written, which is not to say it's a good way of getting a network operated. And that distinction we've got to make really clearly. How is the software written? How is the network governed?
And I think Dmitry and myself, we did contribute to CryptoKitties hysteria. So, yeah, we take part of responsibility for that. And when we are talking about fees, let's be a bit sensational. I think most of us read on Reddit and Discord that EOS was accused of deploying smart contracts that will be producing absolutely useless tokens that will be increasing basically gas price. And the gas price is up. And there are some supposedly traces, and I would like just to hear what do you think, guys? Probably EOS shall start.
I don't know. Maybe He has some information about that from Ethereum network side, but like I cannot believe this cannot be true, because you know, the US network is just starting, so there are guys who are unhappy with that, and probably they're accusing doing some bad things. But from the other side, like. Of course, it can be done. Just technically speaking, it can be done. You can produce some useless transactions just to raise fees, but I don't believe it's true. It's rather the rumor here. But what's for sure, like where I agree with Vinay here about the software development, the Unix software, the Unix-like operating systems development model showed us that it's the correct way of doing things. There is a foundation, there is a company that develops that is developing the software that is freely available for everybody here, and who runs the software is just a different thing. It's the same with Ethereum. It's the same with the EOS. You can run your own enterprise EOS network if you need this, just like you do with enterprise Ethereum network, just like you do with I guess with NEM and synchronize with public chain. So
great. After that, I would like to know, and we have plenty of time. Great. So when simple question in simple way, maybe you can answer what are the use cases or who are the clients of your networks? Because now I get that Ethereum is great for CryptoKitties and for scammy tokens, but maybe you have different use cases in mind.
Well, I mean, the Ethereum network has two predominant features, right? The first is an ever-increasing array of collectible animals. Have you seen our collectible animals? They're really cute. We have the world's best collection of collectible animals. And the other thing we've got is probably all of the people that, if they weren't doing Ethereum ICOs, would be running around selling people dishwasher soap by telephone. Right? I think we've done a social service in basically collecting more or less the entire multi-level marketing fraud universe in a single place.
I think it's the best definition of ICO lately.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable how fast the ability to just sell securities to the public has turned into an enormous mess, right? But that's what happens when you let people sell securities to the public. It turns out to be an enormous mess. It's what happened in 1929 when we got actual financial regulation because of that, unfortunate incident. So, I mean, my expectation is that what you're going to see is an SEC-led crusade and purge of the ICO ecosystem. Right, ordinary Americans are losing a bunch of money. The SEC is hiring lawyers basically as fast as it can print money, and I think you're going to see probably 100 prosecutions in the next 12 months.
How it will impact the Ethereum itself?
Oh, you mean the network? Well, finally you'll be able to get the bloody token animals to sell. Look, now we have pet alligators, right? So, I mean, whether it will affect the Ethereum token price is another question, right? I think a really good purge might be very good for the credibility of the project as a whole. But to be honest, I think that it's going to be largely irrelevant because we're going to get a lot of action on scaling probably right around the same time as you're beginning to see the SEC clean out. So I think the real conversation is, okay, now we've got, a working version of Plasma and there are a whole bunch of fast systems. You get things that look like apps you could download in an app store that actually do services in a kind of reasonable way. At last, right? I mean, we've only been waiting, 4 years, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, I don't want to take too much time on this, but extremely briefly, I think that the business to consumer blockchain world is largely not going to work, simply because consumers are already so well served by credit cards. I think the real application is business-to-business use, and we still haven't managed to bootstrap a real business-to-business blockchain ecosystem at any level. So the hope is that when you get some kind of scaling, you can begin to see real business-to-business use. But we're still very badly conditioned by the app revolution to think business-to-consumer is where the game is. I think business-to-consumer is largely saturated, and it's business-to-business is where the game is. So the hope is that you basically exterminate the scammers, come back with some scaled blockchain stuff, and maybe it's solid enough that you begin to see real business adoption. Because that's really fundamentally the unsolved problem of the internet, is businesses are still invoicing each other by sending PDF files or Excel files in email, and then you've got monkeys manually rekeying these things at every possible opportunity, and then other monkeys come along and repair the errors, and that system is like a third of the employees in most big companies. So that's really the place where, for the blockchain project as a whole, that's the mess that we need to get into getting rid of. And if we can't get in there, we're fighting with the App Store guys for tiny shares of consumer markets, rather than going into the 40 trillion a year of global trade, which is currently being done with Excel files.
Are we running out of time?
Are you sure? Yeah. So let's speak twice.
Okay, I'll say very quickly, like, we didn't do an ICO. We decided not to do an ICO. And one of the big reasons we decided not to do that was... so that's a completely different conversation. That does happen, but not from us. So the reason we did that is because we wanted to launch technology and try and keep the signal-to-noise ratio good. Because if you get a large number of speculators and a large number of people who are just buying a token and just really like, when's this going to list on this exchange? When's this going to list on Binance? When am I going to do a moon? You stop actually being able to hear the customer and have a proper discord with the developers. So what we're doing is we launched our AlphaNet and we sat down and we went, what do we actually want to achieve? So what we want to achieve is to give anyone anywhere friction-free access to the digital economy. Right? What you've got here is a lowering of barriers and friction in owning and transferring assets, tokens, coins, and creating logic around that. That can be business, it can be consumer, it can be whatever. Right? But then how do you achieve that? We're not going to be able to reach through and do every single one of those use cases. What you have to do instead is concentrate on giving developers the best possible tools to build and deploy on your platform. So everything that we do is about building great tools for developers, making it as easy as possible, like get that security, easy to build Venn diagram as close to overlapping as possible, as it currently is very much not overlapping. So that's sort of where we're focused at the moment.
So, and your users will be developers.
So just very fast.
I would mention about the business adoption of the blockchain technologies. I think is the main thing that why business not actually adopting in big scale is the main reason is not the speed. I think the main reason is stability, and I think not any company want to invest like a couple of millions in application development when they don't know that that network gonna fork the next month. So I would think that's the main thing of adoption, what's stopping adoption. And I'm interested in how our networks thinking to solve that.
Yeah, but Hashgraph users will be users. Who will be the user of institution, consumer?
I imagine all different cases because we will have a file storage, we will have smart contracts, and we will have a cryptocurrency. I imagine we have a really high potential for the corporate adoption, because the main thing that I mentioned that stops adoption is forks, and with the governance we have the protection of the forking. That I think is the main advantage comparing with other networks if viewing from the corporate views.
Great, so
Yeah.
you're focused on the corporate clients. NEM.
So I think, I agree with lots of things that the developer tools are really important, and also that probably the corporations are the ones that are more interested than individuals. So I believe that the biggest user base for us, because we already see that happening, is B2B consortium networks. and they build an ecosystem that a user can tap into, either through the public chain or through the network directly. So there will be a portion where end users are actually using a public chain and maybe some other networks, but most of it, like most of the value, will be between business to business, and I think that's also quite realistic because they are not willing to go to an unregulated public chain for now, and setting up consortiums is still easier than just going to a public chain.
If I get it right, your clients will be businesses who will offer their services for their clients.
Well, so business-to-business consortium chains that solve a domain-specific issue for these businesses, but they can also interact between other networks based on the same standard. So that's why you also have an offering for individuals, and they can interact with that.
Yeah, EOS is meant for masses. It's just for general, for general distributed applications. To program in the easy way, with a low-level language, to program the backend for such applications like CryptoKitties and other these crypto killer apps, and that's it. It's just for everybody.
And a little bit like Raddix, and it's Raddix for developers, Ethereum network for CryptoKitties lovers, and probably and will you have scams too?
No. That's for sure. That's not a copy of any other blockchain. It's using. Like we will get rid of the scams with this distributed governance model. Of course, we can ban accounts. Of course, we are like we have arbitration, and that's great thing. We can continue the discussion somewhere.
Okay, thank you guys. Do we have any time left, or that's it? That's it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being.
We're doing a hackathon at the end of this week